Okay, humans, now that we have an understanding of how parenting works and how joints work and how joint orientation works, it's time to put it all together. And this is what we're going to be doing in this video. Um, Before we begin, I'd like to mention something that this is not the most optimal way of animating our current player. In other words, don't always try to go the most complicated way. In this situation, a bend deformer from the deformer set menu, like some of these nonlinear deformers, you could have used the vertices, the vertex animation just fine. But in this situation, I'm going to use a skeleton for several reasons. One is obviously to show you how to do it on your own model, depending on what you've modeled, because I assume you have your own model by now in the background. Second of all is because there are some pretty tricky things when it comes to rigging in general when you want to combine everything together. And the third one is that if you were to expand on this idea, on this principle, that you needed to do something else instead of just moving up and down, which is what our player was going to be doing when the worm is going to be doing when it moves from left to right, then you might need to create a rig anyway. That's why sometimes for extensibility purposes, you want to have a fully rigged character so that you can have a wider choice of animation available. Otherwise, obviously, if you just need one little thing, like I don't know, like a grenade breaking apart, yeah, obviously deformers and vertex animation is going to be a lot easier to perform. Remember though, skeleton animation, joints, and rigging are not necessarily limited to organics. You could use them on anything, all right? Anything mechanical, swings, chains, like metal chains, ropes. They're usually also joint chains. Sometimes depends on what you're doing. So it's completely fine to use them for anything other than organics, all right? Now, before you begin doing anything, you want to zero out your mesh. Notice here, I've already done that prior, but we did have a problem before. Remember when my actual transformer here was actually somewhere high up. It wasn't on the bottom of the mesh. Now it is. I set it up at the bottom of the mesh with the snaps. Remember the X, the C, and the V, they both snap to different things. So you just press D, you move your thingy wherever you want it to, and then you leave it there. Okay, I want to do that because I've already created my, I've already zeroed out my mesh. Now, obviously, we're going to have to use the side because, see, we even have a problem here with one of the vertices. I'm not going to fix that because eventually I will delete the left side and I will only use the right side because we will have to retopologize this whole mesh. Obviously, this is not needed because we only have so very few actors on screen at one time, especially in our little game. But most of the time you don't want to be having this because this is even hard to work with. Okay, this is overkill. So you do want to retopologize at least just for practice. But also it's a good thing to keep it standard, right? It's good. It's a good thing to do. Okay, to your meshes. You don't want to have too many polygons in any situation. All right. So what I'm going to do now, you could obviously, if you had a much simpler mesh, you could just go into your wireframe mode and work away with like that. But in my situation, this doesn't really help much. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open the channel box here. I'm going to create a layer, call it player. Well, player layer. I'm going to make it something unintrusive like this dark cyan, and I'm going to save it. I'm going to add my selection to the layer. I'm going to make it into a template. The template is something that allows you to see it but not interact with it. All right, remember this reference, you can snap to it. If I put in a reference, I can snap to this thing, but if I put it on a template, then things are different. I can no longer snap to it. This will obviously disable my ability to place to use the joint projection to center the joints. But in my situation, they didn't work in the first place, so I'm not really losing anything at all. So I'm going to open up the skeleton menu. I'm going to pop it off here, set myself up, and I'm going to start creating some joints. So let's go. Let's go and pop some joints. Now, because I'm doing this manually, the perspective view isn't really helping me much, and neither will it in your situation. So you want to go ahead and start from the top view or from the side view, whichever one is you're most comfortable with. Just place some joints, just eyeball them. I'll probably place 6 joints by the looks of it, so it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Notice that they're pretty crooked, right? They're pretty badly put, but that's okay. That's okay. We've done with the joints, so this is our joint chain. Notice that currently it is very bendy, so to speak. So what I'm going to do, starting at my root, my first one, I'm going to go and zero everything out here. So it's at 0, 0, 0. In this situation, though, the X on this joint here is definitely not something that you need, because you need to touch, because this is how far, this tells Maya how far it is from the original, because it's parented to it. Remember, when you parent something, the child's transform is relative to the parent. So if I zero this out, it'll go back to its parent, which is not what we want. Okay. Next thing is here. We've got x's, 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 and x's. That is fine. Notice though, even though I just sort of, everything is on the x, they're still not on one line. So what gives? Well, this has to do with the joint orientation. Now, before we go into the joint orientation, I still want to kind of do this from the top here so that we can see this is properly aligned. So I'm going to move this up. Eyeball it, obviously. I don't know, like so. This looks kind of okay. These look fine. You can use the up and down arrow keys, by the way, to move past, to go into the hierarchy. I'm going to move this a little bit back, and I'm going to move this a little bit down. And I'm not going to touch this bit here for one very simple reason. Okay. What I'm going to do though now is go into my attribute editor. I'm going to close this for a second. Open the attribute editor, and let's take a look at what we've got. The joint orientation tool is important here because it allows you to see what's the story here with your orients. If we take a look from the top now, over here, we will immediately fix the issue. Obviously, this will shift our current setup. That's why I didn't, go gung-ho about aligning it, because this is what you initially want to do. See, the joint orients, usually you want them to be at most on one axis. Let me just expand this a little bit here. You want them to be at one axis. You don't want to have joint orients in every single axis. Try to limit yourself on one value per axis per joint, all right? Now this is close to minus 90, so I'm going to go ahead and say it's minus 90. That's fine. Here it's, here it's 180, but we have a problem here, so we got to zero this bit out. Next up is, there's another issue here. So I'm going to zero this bit out as well. I'm going to grab this, zero this out, and zero this out. And this is also always 0. The final joint in any joint chain must be 0, 0, 0 so that it aligns with the rest of the joint chain. All right. Now that I've sorted this bit out, let's go and take a look on the side view. Actually, let's align this first. Oh, that's actually pretty well aligned. Okay. The side view. Now, my one option is to just move this bit here, which is fine. All right. This is absolutely legitimate. Okay. Another option would be to use the alignment on this joint here, but it already has one value, and I would have to rotate more, and that is something that I don't want to do. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to rotate. All right, I'm not going to translate. I'm going to rotate this very simply like this, like so. And there we go. Now, almost always, actually, no, always you want to have your rotate values here at 0. That's why you have the joint orient, by the way. That's fine, though, because I'm just going to zero these out. Once you freeze the transforms, they will go back to 0. Obviously, another option would be to just manually move this with the transform up and down, okay? But that's okay, because now we're going to start with our alignment, orientation. And that's the most important bit when it comes to joints. So without further ado, let's just begin. I'm going to go and close this bit out. And I'm sorry, kind of mouth dry. I'm going to open the orient joints tools here, and we will take a look. I'm just going to grab the whole hierarchy. I think there must be a shortcut. I think it's a shift click or something when you can grab the whole thing, but it doesn't matter. Now, first thing is, do not orient your joints to the world. That is pointless. Although in this situation, it could probably work, but never mind about it. Our current settings are fairly well done, actually. They're really well done. I'm going to toggle the axis visibility so that we have a little bit better understanding on which is which. See, we have a discrepancy here in our joints. This does not really help us in any way. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click apply here to orient my joints, and this didn't really help out a lot. But that is because in general, I'm using the minus here. So I'm going to go and set it up to the plus, going to click apply. This is fine, but then not all the joints are done. Notice here that this is being flipped. So I'm going to select this specific joint. I'm going to click apply. All right, we're going to have to reverse this then. Apply. All right, what's the story with this one? Oh, okay, so see, this is the problem. Got to zero this thing out. Now apply to the plus. Okay. There we go again. There we go again. There's always issues with this tool. Like, I've never had it work 100% on me. Like, every time I try to do something, this thing starts just spewing garbage at me. So I'm gonna have it like this. No, my bad. Minus 90. Like this. There we go. All right, this is much better. It doesn't really matter, to be fair. It doesn't matter which way these are pointing, plus or minus. This is for your own sanity's sake. But it kind of pisses me off that whenever I try to do something of this caliber, they always screw it up. All right. Same thing here. I highly doubt that Maya will indulge me, and of course it won't. No, of course it won't. All right, fine. There we go. And we're gonna have to move this up and down a little bit, and this is obviously 0, 0, 0. Yeah, so as you can see, you can't really beat the manual method, and at the end of the day, these are nicely aligned, and will not make you any problems. Obviously, I didn't have to do that. Most of the time, this is fine. I mean, this is only for a few rotations. You know, in some situations, they'd be on the minus, some they'd be on the plus. But in most cases, you want them to be aligned. All right, you want this whole joint chain to have one alignment, so that you don't have to look. It's easier to have it done like this and not worry about it than having it bite you in the ass later down the line. So the only thing left to do now is to mirror the damn things. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this useless almost tool. At least I find it quite annoying, although it does perform pretty well for, you know, in general. I mean, if you don't care about your joints here. And I'm going to grab this joint chain. Before I actually mirror them, we got to open up our outliner, and I'm going to take a look at the joints. Now, it's important to have your joints fairly well categorized. In other words, you got to rename them so that you have an easier time finding them out later down the line. In this case, it's not really a big deal because, I mean, we only have a few joints and it's a very small object. But imagine if you had a human, you had pelvises, clavicles, knees, elbows, right? That's quite a lot of joints, and you want to be able to find them quickly and to see how the hierarchy looks. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is my central. It's my central joint. And I'm just going to go and say this is the right side. Okay. I think there was a way to rename them easier than just double clicking, but I'll have to do. Go. Rename all your joints. Or you can have your own little setup here. You can choose to name them however you like, but try to keep to the same setup. Oops. There. Try to keep to the same setup. It's easier to understand what's going on after that. Right, now that we have this bit, I'm going to go ahead and open the mirror joints tool. So if we take a look here, what do we want to mirror it across? Which plane do we want to mirror it across? And because I've done this before on other projects, and so I already have Maya set up. But essentially, once you mirror them, you're going to tell Maya to rename them, and search for the term R and rename it with the term L. In other words, this is going to be the equivalent, but on the left side. All right. Let's take a look at what plane we're going to mirror across. It's X, Y, or Y, Z. Easy enough to figure this out. Just look at the bottom left here, and in our situation, you want to mirror it across the XZ plane. So apply. Yeah, there we go. The XZ plane, and we have it applied, but we've created a problem. All right, the problem is if we open up here, and we'll see that we've created another joint chain. All right, there we go. That's another joint chain. Yeah, it has replaced it, but it is essentially a separate being. If we go ahead and move it, they don't have anything in common. So I'm going to delete this, and now I'm going to grab the child of the first child in the chain, and I'm going to do the same operation. Now they are properly set up. As you can see, this is reflected in our hierarchy, and this is a correct way of mirroring joints. Okay, you don't want to be mirroring just you want to mirror the root. Don't want to mirror the root. Now, obviously, this created a little bit of a problem with our alignment, but in general, this is actually not an issue, because even though the x's are flipped, you could say, well, yeah, they are flipped, but this is an issue. Sure, we can fix that. But in general, this is not going to create a huge problem, all right? But for vanity's sake, let's just go ahead and do this. So go ahead and open the orient joint, and let's see if Maya will be able to once again satisfy our requirements. In our case, we want to have the x being the primary axis, which it currently is, and that's not an issue, even though it's pointing backwards. But we want to have the z going upwards, the y going to the right. Obviously, it's impossible to have it on both sides because the alignment is just, that's how it works. But let's click apply, see what happens. This is pretty good. This actually worked pretty well. Wow. I did not expect it to work at least half as decent, right? So I'm going to go ahead and grab this and apply the same operation. Nope. See, that's what I'm saying. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. It's really beyond me how this whole thing tries to configure itself. All right, even if you try different, no. Maybe it's just my build. Maybe I'm just running a broken Maya, right? But it is definitely not what I want right now. So I'm going to go ahead and open the attribute editor once more. And let's see what we've got here. The y-axis is 180, which is fine because we just flipped this. Right? If I zero this out, it's going to go sideways, and we don't want that. So 180 is fine. But our other joint orients, the z-axis, has to be. See, if we really want to keep this steady, we're going to have to use the rotate, because the joint orient is going to be a problem once you have more than one value here. So we're going to have to use our orientation tool and just rotate this 180 degrees. Come on then. Which way do we want to go again? All right, okay. To be fair, this is actually way better. Yeah. We're gonna have to rotate around the z-axis first. The z-axis first by 180. Minus 180. Then we want to rotate around the x-axis by 180, and then like this, and then I got confused. I got very confused here, to be honest with you. I think I should have just left it alone. What have I done now? Right. Look, just zero these suckers out. Let's see what happens again. All right. So let's see. Got a joint orient. we can't really twist the Z. Like, this is going to be quite annoying if we decide to do this whole thing. But let's go and do this at 0, and we 180 the X. See what happens then. Actually, this is not the X, but the Z. There we go. Well, this is a little bit better. But then it's not aligned properly, so we're going to have to... I really don't know how this whole chain of events happen. Why is this one-sided and why is the other bit not one-sided is beyond me. Let's see what happens if I just do this whole thing all over again. Look, at the end of the day, like I said, it's not really a big issue because once you have one side done, you'll be fine with the other working correctly most of the time. But I'm going to go ahead and mirror these suckers again. Let's go mirror joints, behavior, search for replace, blah, blah, blah. By the way, behavior is going to flip, theoretically, is going to flip the joints. Actually, I think I should just zero them out before I do that. So in order to zero them out, I'm going to go ahead and grab all of them. Doesn't really matter, but I'm going to freeze all its transforms. By the way, before you freeze, don't freeze the joint orient, because this is going to orient them according to the world, and that's not what you want. All right, take a look. See what happened? No, thank you. So get rid of this whole joint orient here, and just freeze it like it is right now. Now that the freeze transform is done, everything should be zeroed in, except the translates. Yep. Anything beside the translates is 0. Yeah. Excellent. Now if we mirror this, this should be sort of working, hopefully. Mirror joints. Well, I didn't even need to open it up. Let's see, mirror joints. Well, technically it is mirrored, aside from the x-axis for some reason. You really want the x-axis to be pointing towards the child, not towards the parent. So I believe we should be able to actually do this right now here and orient the joints. Primary axis should be X, secondary axis should be Z, and apply. And what just happened? Suddenly it all freaking worked. See, that's what I'm saying. How did this, like, whatever. Look, that's sorted now. Obviously, the secondary axis will be flipped. That's just the nature of the beast. You can't have it going, you know, being the same, because otherwise this wouldn't be a mirror. All right. Obviously, you could have done another thing, right? You could have just duplicated this bit. Well, duplicated this bit. Let me just duplicate this and unparent it. And, you know, let's say this is what your current situation is. This is your root. You're going to duplicate this. You're going to rotate it by 180. And this is exactly what we just done. Now, you might say it would have been a lot easier to just do it by hand, right? You just do it by hand. You go 180, and there's your whole setup here. And it's all correctly aligned. You don't have any problems. You don't need to use this whole Maya crap. You know, I just wanted to show you that it is possible in both ways. Obviously, you need to zero this out afterwards. So you'd be like, you know, you'd probably go to, again, to modify and freeze transforms. And that would be it. So you'd have your all set up here. So you just pick your choice, all right? Just make sure that 2 of the axes are pointing in the same direction, all right? The y-axis is fine. We're using the z and the x as the primary and the secondary, so y can go screw itself, all right? I'm going to delete these 2 joints, and that is the end of that. Oh, actually, wait, we forgot one more thing, and that is to zero out our ending. There we go. This is 0. Now our whole joint chain is correctly aligned. We've got all the orientation done. Everything is according to plan. Let's take a look from the side. Beautiful. We don't have any issues. Well, maybe we do a little bit on one side, but that's fine because we're going to flip one of the sides over, which I actually just missed. Which bit are we going to flip again? I think it was this flip. Let's just take a look at the geometry and we will immediately find out. I'll just get rid of the reference. Can I select this, please? Come on then. Oh, there we go. Now I found it. I found it. Object mode. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to flip this side over here. I may have actually performed the opposite operation. I think I sorted it out for the other side, but that's fine. We'll once we flip one side, it'll fit to the other. Okay, guys, that is it. That's all I wanted to show you. When it comes to rigging, at least you need to just play around with it, right? Whatever model you have made, make sure that at the end of the day, you follow 3 simple rules, right? Rule number 1. Let me just go ahead and open this up for you. No, these are the tool settings. Rule number 1. I'm going to select this joint here. Rule number 1. If you change the rotate order, okay, of your joint, you're going to have to change the primary axis of the joint, right? Because you always want to have your X, the joint axis, the primary joint axis, to be rotating last. And in this case, my rotates, the first thing on this list is the last thing to rotate, all right? So if it's like X, Y, Z, Z is the first one to rotate, Y is the second one to rotate, X is the last one to rotate, because it's the primary rotation axis, all right? So if I decide to say, well, I'm going to use my primary as a Y, yeah, I'm going to have to change the rotation order to be either Y, X, Z, or Y, Z, X, all right? In your case, I probably just leave it alone. And that's why I said that rotation order is important. Keep it to default. Don't change it unless you obviously run into problems and you actually are forced to changing it. But in most situations, you can fix any problem without changing the rotation order. Second most important rule: have only one value on your joint orient here. All right. Joint orient is not the same as joint rotate, by the way. Your rotates and scales should always be zeroed out. Obviously, the scale should be 1, 1. But the rotate must always be 0. It doesn't matter where it is the joint, how was the joint done, anything, just have it as 0, all right? If you're going to rotate something, 0 it out after that. Usually, it's best to use the joint orientation tool, though. The only time you have to use the rotate here, if you want to position the joint by rotation without translating, okay? So in this situation here, I've already showed you, I could have used the translate, right? I could have just grabbed this joint and translated up and down, which would have been fine, which is actually more correct thing to do, the more correct thing to do. What I've done here is not technically correct because I have a problem here with my with my rotate, right? As you can see, it's pointing in a different direction. It's not pointing upwards like the rest of them. It's actually pointing sideways. But because my mesh is in such a situation, and this is not really a professionally high-level detailed model, this is not really going to create a huge problem, all right? Like I said, I could have used the rotation here, but again, that would have introduced a secondary value, and at the end of the day, this would create some problems if I start doing some fancy things, right? This wouldn't create a problem for this particular model, but if you have something a lot more complicated with IK handles and FKs and all that jazz, then you might run into an issue. And then if you do run into an issue like that, you're going to have to disassemble almost all of your thing. You're going to have to start duplicating stuff, modifying them, trying to figure out where the issue is. You know, you change one orientation, all of it changes, right? So if I change this orientation, if I go, oh, I don't know, I want this to be to, I don't know, 90. Boom, your whole joint chain changes. So you need to start changing the other bits as well. You're going to have to rotate this backwards, right? You're going to have to zero it out again. So this is all really not something that you want to do, because if I go ahead and change this to 90, I'm going to have to grab this and reposition the whole thing back where it was, okay? And then I'm going to have to do this over here as well if I don't like its own joint orientation. So this is definitely something you want to do early, okay? Very early. And don't do what I've done, by the way. This was a bad example. I just wanted to show you that if you had a rotation, you had to zero it out. In my case, I didn't have anything I had to rotate, so I just created a rotation that I needed to perform. But you don't want to be doing that, okay? In your case, always just go ahead and translate the bone, because this is basically the bone's coordinates, where it is relative to its parent, all right? Never have this kind of discrepancy, all right? that's it basically, guys. Play on your models, see what you can do with them. Try to get them to work the way you want. Obviously, test it out once you're done. So I'm going to turn this back into a template. Test it out. Grab your joints, right? Move them up and down. Well, in this case, don't move them up and down, but you get the idea. You can rotate something. Notice, by the way, that if we rotate this, we're going to rotate the whole joint chain, and that is not what we want, right? This is supposed to be our center. So if I lift this, I should be lifting only that, okay? But we're going to do this later once we go with a spline, and we'll sort this out. But for now, just have a hierarchy. Make sure that your whole setup here is correct. At the end of the day, though, you need to add one root, but we're going to add the root at the end once we're done with everything else. But the more you work with joints, the more you're going to have to use the outliner, because the hierarchy is going to get pretty long. I mean, I've seen people with hierarchies that you got to scroll for like half an hour before you end up to where you want to go. So they usually just use a search, and that's where, by the way, your naming convention kicks in. If you know how you named your joint, search for it, you will find it, no matter how deep it is hidden or anything, right? So there's that. I'll see you guys next time when we start to actually create a control rig. All right, this is the important bit, because the control rig will allow us to control our current rig. That's not to say that I can't just grab a bone right now and start rotating stuff and moving it up and down, okay? But that is to say that it is quite annoying to do so because remember, here I can actually select the mesh as well. So it's like, what are the chances of me selecting the bone correctly? I mean, if I miss, if I'm close, look, I'm close to the bone, I'm pressing, but it's not always registering. So this is quite annoying. All right, not to mention that if you have other things, it will get fairly cluttered. All right, so there's that. I'll see you guys next time, and play with your models. Make them good. Align the joints, orient them correctly. Otherwise, you will suffer in the long run. Bye.